to this next edition of the ongoing The Business of Intermodal Continues series from IANA. I'm really proud to have a great panel today of industry experts in this session we're calling Next Level Truck Technology and the Effects on Intermodal's Competitive Landscape. I want to first of all thank our Platinum Plus sponsors. These are our year-round sponsors who go the extra mile to help us out. They make this programming possible, as well as a lot of other activities that we do educationally and otherwise at the association. So a big thanks to our Platinum Plus sponsors to make this possible. So with that, I am going to turn it over to my friend Tim Humbert to say a few words.
My name is Tim Humbert. I'm the Director of North American Intermodal at C.H. Robinson. I'm pleased to welcome you to today's webcast, Next Level Truck Technology and the Effects on Intermodal's Competitive Landscape, part of IANA's The Business of Intermodal Continues program. On behalf of the entire C.H. Robinson team, I'd like to thank you for joining us. We got a great panel lined up for you today. Seth Clevenger, the managing editor at Transport Topics, will be our moderator as we dig into the explosion of truck-based technology and what it means for intermodal. Seth, over to you.
Well, hello, and thank you all for tuning into our panel on next level truck technology and its effects on intermodal's competitive landscape. This is a really great session we have lined up for you, and we're going to talk about two of the biggest mega trends that are shaping the future of commercial vehicles. And those trends are electric-powered trucks and the emergence of automated driving technology. If you don't know me personally, I'm managing editor of features at Transport Topics. I've been covering the transportation industry for 9 years now. Still have yet to have my first boring day on the job writing about this very exciting and fast-moving industry. And of course, you can find our work online at ttnews.com. To the subject at hand, as we all know, all of the major truck manufacturers and many of their tier 1 suppliers have been investing heavily in electric-powered trucks. Now, some of these vehicles are already out on the road hauling freight and paving the way for broader commercial rollouts. At the same time, automated driving systems continue to advance. Driver assist technology is beginning to incorporate automated steering capabilities, and the testing and development of self-driving trucks is expanding. As we look ahead, these advances in technology have the potential to reshape the competitive landscape in the transportation industry. Now, we're fortunate to have just an excellent group of industry experts with us here today to discuss what this is all going to mean for the future of freight, especially for intermodal operations. So without any further delay, I'd like to introduce our panelists. Joining us are Bill Bleem, Senior Vice President of Fleet Services at NFI Industries, Robert Brown, Head of Government and Public Affairs at self-driving truck developer Too Simple, Brian Cota, Vice President of National Accounts at Daimler Trucks North America, and Tony Hatch, Principal at AB Hatch Consulting. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'd like to start by asking each of you to just briefly tell us a little bit more about yourselves, your industry background, and how your companies are working with these next level technologies. Bill, would you like to lead us off?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Seth. Quick intro about NFI. We're a privately held, family-owned logistics company that was started by our current ownership's grandfather in 1932. We have revenues over $2 billion, and we operate in several spaces, including distribution, where we have over 53 million square foot of warehouse space, owned and operated dedicated transportation with 4,500 tractors and over 12,000 pieces of trailing equipment, intermodal operations with company-owned stackable refrigerated containers, as well as brokerage, global transportation management, and we're also one of North America's largest port drayage carriers. My 40-year career has been mostly on the diesel maintenance and asset management side of the business. My team at NFI is responsible for all asset management from purchasing to disposition, life cycle management, maintenance, fuel, and everything that goes along with it. And as part of all this, we get to test and validate all the fun stuff, all the next technologies, and keep NFI on the leading edge. Today, this includes Class 8 tractors, yard horses, electric tractors and yard horses, as well as all the radar and camera safety technologies, which is leading to the autonomous tech.
Well, thank you, Bill. And I'll ask the same question to you, Robert. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're working on at Too Simple.
Yeah, thank you, Seth, and thanks for having me. We are a very old company, founded in 2015, which is actually pretty old for a startup. And I've been with the company almost 3 years. Too Simple is a SAE level 4 technology integrator. With we made a big announcement with International, with Navistar, to vertically integrate our technology within their truck for a factory-built solution in 2024. Too Simple, we're headquartered in San Diego, California. All the fun stuff, I like to say, is out in Tucson, Arizona. And every day we haul for folks like UPS and McLean Foods, kind of bookending between Phoenix and Dallas is our kind of our testing area as we develop the technology. Looking forward to this conversation, and it should be fun.
Well, thank you, Robert. And Brian, could you tell us a little bit more about the work that you're doing over at Daimler Trucks North America?
Yeah, thanks, Seth. And Robert, normally when you talk about the fun in Tucson, you're talking about January, not when it's 110 degrees outside. But my name is Brian Coda with Daimler Trucks North America, a little over 25 years now, representing the Freightliner, Western Star brands, Detroit, Thomas School Buses, FCCCs, walk-in vans. So Seth, to answer your question, there's a lot going on from a technology perspective. Of course, we continue to push and advance the diesel side, knowing that's going to be a big component of the industry for the next several years. We have new diesel engines coming out. We're looking at 6x2 configurations, anything to reduce greenhouse gas, etc. We currently offer natural gas product and have been doing so with our Cummins partners for 8+ years in production. One of the hot things, of course, battery electric vehicles. We've had battery electric vehicles in the hands of Bill and some other customers here the past 18 months. Just announced that we've accumulated over 300,000 miles, but I think if we had this next week, we would say 350,000 miles. We also are in the autonomous space as well, of course, today with level 2 technology with some of our partners. We have a commitment by the end of the decade to also have level 4 technology available to us. And then we're looking at fuel cell technology development by the end of the decade as well, so that our customers have the options that fit the solutions that they're looking for. And thanks for having me, Seth.
Of course. Thank you, Brian. And Tony, I think, of course, many of our viewers already know you well, but for those who might not, tell us a little bit about yourself and the work you do.
Thank you, Seth, and thanks, Diana, for having me, and I miss Expo. So this is a great panel, and I feel a little like I should be on Bill's wall over there because I'm a little bit of a fish out of water here. I've been an analyst of rails and trucks for 30+ years, and this century I've run my own consultancy. So I follow the intermodal industry, and I've been a big participant as often as I could in IANA events, etc. So I've become aware over the last several years of what I would call the Trojan horse of safety and the technology coming on the trucking side that all these esteemed people will talk about, and the possibilities for rail intermodal as well as the existential threat. And there's two things I really want to say about it. One is, at present, railroads under the best circumstances have, I think, 5 structural advantages over the highway, and that is they're more labor efficient currently. They're more fuel efficient currently. The AAR talks about a 4-to-1, pulling a ton a mile. Therefore, they're also more emissions efficient and promote their ESG and green credentials. Then the fourth and fifth, and I'll address them over the course of this talk, is they're more network efficient, meaning that they have the only positive graded infrastructure network in the United States by the American Civil Engineers Society. And finally, they are financially incredibly strong. So they face this, these changing times with a big bank account. I've been made aware, and I want to thank 3 people for helping me become aware of what we're going to talk about here. One is Rod Case of Oliver Wyman, who at my RailTrends conference a few years ago really woke up to the amount of market share that could disappear if those first 2 things are really attacked in a big way, and that is labor and fuel advantages. The second was Matt Rose, BNSF's former leader, who woke us up to the fact that so many people are working very hard, and that while railroads are big companies, their slice of the overall miles traveled is very small. So those folks who are in California are thinking about changing trucks more than they are thinking about changing rails, although Wabtec is working on a battery-powered locomotive, et cetera. And the last one that really got everybody to sit up in the chair was the Rocketeer himself, Elon Musk, who talked about his new truck being the suicide for railroads. Now, while I was pleased he didn't say homicide, because I don't think the railroads will take their own share out, it still woke us up that very smart people like those on this panel are working on ways to remove some of those advantages that railroads have had structurally for many years.
Thank you for that, Tony. Thank you all for sharing a little bit of insight into your daily lives. Really right at the center of some of the most interesting and exciting changes in our industry. So I want to start the conversation with electric trucks. There's been a lot of buzz about that. A lot of new developments over the last couple of years. And again, electric trucks really represent a dramatic change. Not only in vehicle architecture, but also for fleet management. You need to consider factors like vehicle range and charging infrastructure. So this is not as simple as, replacing a diesel truck with an electric truck. There's so much more to it than that. And just so happens that, NFI, one of the companies represented on our panel, has been among the first fleets to actually deploy electric trucks in its operations. In your case, NFI, through partnerships with Daimler and Volvo. So I'm very curious to hear about your experiences so far. So Bill, based on what you've seen so far in your fleet with electric vehicles, what are your main takeaways? What have you learned? Especially, what have you learned about what it takes to operate these vehicles in real-world freight conditions?
Yeah, so first, let me start with the trucks are fantastic. They're doing fantastic. Just realized today in collaborating with the Daimler team that it was a year ago today that was sitting in Napa Valley with Brian and a bunch of other people looking at delivery of our first eCascadia. So today, a year later, we're honing in on 200,000 of those miles that Brian mentioned earlier on our 10 eCascadias. We made over 1,500 trips from the Inland Empire in Southern California to the ports of LA and Long Beach with those tractors. The drivers love them. Drivers absolutely love them. The biggest complaint that we hear is that we don't have more of them. And every once in a while, one of these guys has to jump back in a diesel and he hates it. So that's the biggest complaint from the drivers. As far as takeaway, even though we're talking about a relatively small amount of trucks, being 10 trucks, gone are the days when I used to be able to call up Brian a few times, and after 3 or 4 phone calls, we'd hash out a deal for 500 tractors, and it's automatic, right? Today with the EVs, there's a lot more hoops that we need to jump through, and multiple parts of our organization that were never involved before need to be now front and center. So, we're looking at our real estate for the infrastructure. We're getting ready to put a big project in place of electric vehicles, and we have to actually purchase real estate to put that infrastructure. Our IT department needs to be involved for the charging solutions and software. Our legal needs to review the 30 contracts or so that all comes from it. And that's not to mention negotiating with the utilities for the best electric rate that we can get without the demand charges.
Well, that's really interesting. I mean, obviously, dealing with electric utilities in this manner is a kind of a new thing for the trucking industry. And, you can kind of expand the ecosystem of folks who are now playing a role in our industry. I want to go over to you, Brian. Of course, Daimler has introduced, as you mentioned earlier, battery electric versions of your Freightliner Cascadia and your medium duty M2 models. And again, those are out on the road. Companies like NFI have been operating them. But what's your perspective on this? What's it going to take for early adopters to integrate these electric vehicles into their businesses, and what are the main obstacles that a manufacturer like you, and your fleet customers are going to have to overcome?
Yeah, thanks, Seth. And Bill, you're going to have about 5 phone calls from different OEs looking to solve that problem for you. But just let you know, we can take care of you as well. Yeah, it's more than just, hey, I want to get into a vehicle like a battery electric vehicle, as Bill outlined. From our side, when there is interest shown, we really want to start with just understanding what the application is, what the route is. Sometimes the wheelbases are a little bit longer, the vehicles are a little bit heavier. We need to understand what kind of range requirements they have, what kind of weights, and if they're going to be pulling grades, are they going to run it 1 shift a day or 2 shifts a day, so that we can understand from a charging perspective, do we have the right truck that will fit the need of what they're looking to accomplish? much like everybody, consulting is a big part of it. We need to help get in there and understand from a utility perspective what you need from a real estate, as Bill outlined. Whether you're going to deploy, one unit, you can get a simple wall charger to kind of get you going. But if you're going to have a fleet of like 10 units like Bill has, now you start getting into contracting a little bit in utilities and making sure you have everything you need on top of the 30 legal contracts that Bill outlined. So, we really, that's kind of the basis. There's a lot of work that goes into it. You just don't buy a battery electric vehicle, give me a quote and I'm going to buy it tomorrow and get that thing coming. There's a lot more that needs to go into it. And so it does expand upon the purchase cycle a little bit. Again, we want to get in there. We want you to be successful with the product. In many cases, California that we talked about early offers a lot of incentives, and incentives are important at this point in the juncture. Battery electric vehicles are more expensive. We have 100 years of experience, from a total cost of ownership on diesel, so we know what those costs will look like. There is some unknowns. There's some new technology on the vehicles. And so, we want to make sure that we have a positive experience, that we can manage how much you pull your batteries down so that we can get a quality, useful life out of the batteries. And so the obstacles and the hurdles that you talked about, it's just more planning, more open, collaborative approach. We put vehicles in the hand of Bill and Penske early on with our innovation fleet so that we can learn everything about it, not just the vehicle operation, but what it takes from a training perspective for your technicians. What do we need to do with local fire departments or tow truck manufacturers in case there's an issue? With the utilities, as Bill says, there's different rates when you get into electricity, and you do not want to charge in California in the month of August at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It gets very expensive. So from an IT perspective and software and the chargers, how can we maximize your ability to charge while keeping the cost down as affordable as possible? These are all the types of things that we need to go through, and we'll work with our customers and the other OEMs out there. We're going to work to make it a successful operation, whether you're looking to buy one truck or hundreds of trucks as Bill's looking to buy.
Well, thank you, Brian. Now, Tony, I want to bring you into the conversation. I want to get your thoughts. How do you see the rollout of electric trucks changing our industry in the years ahead? Especially as you look at the rail side of freight.
So this is that's the suicide pact I was alluding to. It's a direct challenge to two structural advantages that rails have, given certain densities and lanes, and that is, fuel cost advantage, right? And the other is emissions. And if we were to see a magical turnover to an all-electric road fleet, that would be a good for the air that we breathe, and not very good for railroad shareholders. As it's going out now, rails can get some benefits. When NFI goes into this in a big way, that's good for the intermodal ecosystem. So that's good for rail, and it helps make their case. But it's something that needs to be watched. When we're talking about the numbers that Brian just talked about, and the regions and the areas, where it makes a good business case, where it's being subsidized, right now it is something that bears watching. But when you fundamentally change the cost difference between two modes, it's something that needs to be watched. Now, railroads can counter. One is that they're focusing very hard on fuel efficiency themselves on the diesel side. So there's sort of a race to the top to be the most fuel efficient. Right now, the Canadians are leading. The second, we're working on emissions, et cetera, when they're idling locomotives, and they are working on a battery-powered locomotive. The rails do have the infrastructure that if that works in a big way, they can roll. They own their infrastructure, so they can compete on a fuel change basis pretty well. But it's something, it's a competitive world, and this bears watching.
Thank you, Tony. And I'd also like to ask each of you sort of the crystal ball question about just how quickly electric vehicles will or perhaps can scale up in the trucking industry, and the main forces that are going to drive adoption. We heard, Brian earlier, you mentioned government incentives are an important piece of it right now, regulations. But at what point will the business case stand on its own? And of course, Brian, you're manufacturing these trucks, so you'll give you the first crack at this.
No, hey, I appreciate it. And you're right. The one thing that COVID-19 has taught us, with fewer cars on the road, there are people that are reporting clearer skies out there. So there is some awareness to reducing CO2 and pollution so that we can have that cleaner air that Tony referenced there. But regulations are going to be a part of it. As a manufacturer, we also have some regulations ourselves based upon the vehicles that we build. As we go through phase 2 regulations and CO2, there's a need by every truck manufacturer to figure out how they can reduce their carbon footprint of the vehicles that they manufacture. So we're going to be driving that technology because we have regulation to deal with as well. At the local level with incentives, you know, there's a lot of government dollars out there wanting to get this technology, wanting to advance it and push it so that we can get to a place in the future of having that cleaner environment. You know, pretty much everybody, we're not talking about light years away now with this technology. I mean, we're 18 to 24 months before getting into production. So over the next couple of years, it's going to be small in scale to begin with. We are not going to be displacing mass amounts of trucks with battery electric vehicle. Personally, Seth, I think it's really going to take some visibility into the full cycle before we really start getting wholesale buy-in for, you know, a fleet like Bill to go across the board 100% with the technology. You know, generally that's when you're talking about a diesel truck, it's 4 or 5 years. It's unlikely that this is going to be an application where you buy a vehicle and you change it out every few years. You're going to have to run the vehicles longer to make it really work. And so taking a look at that full cycle and understanding the total cost of ownership. But I think as you get, you know, into 5, 6 years of operation, having a full understanding, you'll start to see that take off. Range is going to be a big part of that as well. You know, today our battery electric vehicles on the M2 side on average are running 100 miles a day. On the Class 8 side, 150 miles per day. And so that limits what your opportunities are. As we move towards production, we still have, again, another 18, 24 months for battery technology to improve, for software to improve, to understand from a driver perspective their impact and how they drive the vehicle and how they can extend the range of the vehicle. And so as we extend that range up and get it into 200, 250, 350 miles, then I think you really start to open the door for a larger application of day cabs to kind of move into that direction. But the vehicles are much more expensive. You know, natural gas is more expensive than diesel. Battery electric vehicles are also more expensive. So I think with that regulation, we can kind of start to build that momentum. And then, you know, once we get about 5 years of experience, I think we can naturally set into what a reasonable market will look like for battery electric vehicles.
That's very helpful. And of course, Bill, you're operating some of these trucks today, and you've already expressed interest in expanding that in the future. Tell us how quickly do you want to scale up electric vehicles in your fleet at NFI, and how quickly, you know, will you be able to, and how quickly do you want to? Maybe those are two different questions.
Yeah, so it is. It's two different questions. So how quickly we want to. Myself and ownership over the last couple of years have said, you know, we're going to have upwards of 50% of our fleet by 2025 be electric because we have the perfect application for it. But as we get into this, that number's cutting down because it's not a reality, right? So it has and always has been about the TCO and the application. And so we see the application in the next 3 to 10 years is local, dray, which is a big thing for intermodal, and regional haul, which is a lot. That's 99% of our business is dedicated regional haul, right? And we have an average 350-mile round trip. So until we get to that point, you know, it's going to be limited applications, you know, and need more time to develop that mega charging to be able to get to those higher range and that over the road and long haul applications. You know, are we going to see trucks that go 300 or more miles on a single charge in the next 3 to 5 years? Absolutely. Are they going to be at the same comparable price as diesel? You know, there's no chance. You know, at this point in the game, incentives right now, you know, is the only way to get that TCO, and it seems that the only one with meaningful incentives, the only state right now is California, you know, and so, you know, we need to consider incentivizing the cost of the vehicle, the infrastructure, as well as the electricity to make this viable to get it kicked off. And, you know, other states need to take notice of that because we would love to be running electric vehicles in other states, but right now that's just, you know, it's not viable.
Got it. No, that's very interesting, and always love to hear the answer straight from a fleet who's running the vehicles, on this as well. But before I turn the page and move on to our next topic, Tony, is there anything you want to add to, how you see this market developing?
So if I had one word, I'd say incrementally, right? But we have to keep in mind that the big sophisticated trucking companies out there can change their fleets fast. I think I saw or read that NFI, you guys say that your trucks are, the oldest ones are 2016 vintage. I mean, the railroads have an embedded fleet of old technology that they could, change incrementally themselves. So it's an issue. If things change, it's an issue for rails, given how much money has been sunk into and how long it takes to build their power. But looking at this, especially in our discussion, I got a couple of points. One is the range we're talking about is only helpful to rails. It's not competitive. It helps in drayage. If you're not, rails, there are all sorts of different examples, but rails like to think they're competitive over 500 miles, right? So at that point, we're not at this point talking about that. I would also say, without incentives outside of California, and while rails and citizens shouldn't fight technology that makes air cleaner and people safer and all that, I think you would see a fight if you started talking about incenting a modal competitor to buy different equipment, across other states would be an issue. I'd also want to say for oil prices being, where they are, that in general, I have found in my 30 years that green is a rich person's issue, meaning that when you have the money, you want to change things. California is doing it, but right now there's a lot of use for that money out there, and given where our economy is, and it's just, with oil prices here, people often postpone making changes because you've made diesel trucking that much cheaper. So, this technology is coming, and it's clear, and these smart people are working on it. But right now, it's not a near term. Rails have enough time now to use that if they're heard here in several of these things, to use their financial power to try to figure out how to adopt to this and work with this. So incrementally.
Well, thank you, Tony. With that, I would like to shift our conversation toward the topic of automation. Given that topic, I'd like to start with you, Robert. Of course, Too Simple has been using its self-driving trucks to haul freight for some time now. There's still a safety driver behind the wheel today, but the goal is to eventually enable fully autonomous operations on specific mapped out routes, starting in the Southwest. There's been a lot of news from the company lately, of course. Too Simple, as you mentioned earlier, has an agreement with Navistar to potentially start factory producing self-driving trucks as soon as 2024. And you've also launched your autonomous freight network. So tell us more about where you are on this path toward commercializing your technology, and how do you plan to scale it up in the years ahead?
Thanks, Seth. That's a great question. So how I kind of think a lot of folks, and it seems to work, how people think about our autonomous truck, that we're building with Navistar, that, our engineer team and their engineering team are working daily on that roadmap, and, where it will be deployed, what is its operational design domain, all that good stuff. So you have to have the AV truck to make this technology work, and it has to be factory built, has to be validated from a functional safety perspective, from the automotive grade. So folks like Bill, when they purchase them, they expect the same service levels that they're going to get from a truck that isn't AV capable. And then, as you mentioned, the autonomous freight network is the network. So the truck, you can think of it as the iPhone, right? We need the iPhone, but without the Verizon and AT&T network, you can't use your iPhone. So that's where Too Simple's core competency comes in, is that with our partners like McLean, UPS, US Express, and Penske, we're mapping out the Southwest into Texas. We're in Alliance, Texas now. We'll kind of be building out the triangle there, and then moving, southeast. As you mentioned, it's no coincidence we're sticking to the Sun Belt. It snowed once in Tucson, last year, and that was our extent of snow testing. But yeah, as we build, that relationship with international, we'll eventually, work our way north. But yeah, laser focused on that I-10 corridor. Moving southeast, from Florida to Georgia, up through Tennessee, as we build out with our partners that we haul freight every day. So I always tell people, and I'm stealing this from a friend, it'll be incremental, route specific, and it won't sneak up on anyone. It's not going to be snap your fingers, and then tomorrow the robots are here. I know the media, and I love you, Seth, so I'm not blaming the media. The media has a lot of hype around this stuff. You read the headlines and politics, and I get it. I always kid around if someone was talking about automating government affairs, I'd be nervous too. But the technology as it's deployed will be incremental, not specific, and truly transformative, as Tony has called out, but not quite the massive disruption as some people have kind of the doomsdayers have said.
Yeah, so pardon the cliche, but evolution more than revolution, something that we'll see happen over time, I think is the most helpful way of thinking about this. Of course, at Daimler Trucks North America, you're also investing in automation in a number of ways, both in terms of driver assist technology through Detroit Assurance as your driver assist collision mitigation and active safety technology. And the company is also working to develop self-driving trucks in conjunction with Torque Robotics, a subsidiary. So Brian, could you just speak to DTNA's investments in automation and how you see it playing out?
Yeah, we see this as a key building block to improving safety on the roads, which is a key part. We launched Detroit Assurance, about 6 years ago, bringing the technology over from our European truck manufacturer with active brake assist and adaptive cruise control. In 2019, we've added steering capabilities, so to have a level 2 technology vehicle, and it's incremental steps to help move towards more automation to enhance the driver's experience. And then, as regulation proves out, which will need a lot of help from a regulation perspective, as well as the technology, when every manufacturer can put a safe vehicle on the road, I think that's kind of the holy grail. We are pushing forward with it. Our intention is to help complement, things like what Robert's doing. I mean, it's great for the roads. It's great for the safety and fatalities. Mostly we're there from our customer perspective. And as we have customers that want to jump into more technology, again, once it's available, once it can be safely deployed and regulation allows for that type of technology to happen, we're going to be there. Again, with the Detroit Assurance, and all truck OEMs are doing everything. Our adoption rate on vehicles with collision mitigation systems it's finally at a place where it's not 100%, but it's near 100, not near 100%, depends on the application, but it's very well accepted. The technology works extremely well. And from a driver feedback perspective, we've gained the trust and the confidence for them to see this technology to work, and that it will be building blocks in the future. We're focused on our North American side. We have investment in Torque, which is another autonomous software driving company that's helping us develop. They've been driving vehicles in Blacksburg with a safety driver autonomously now for a period of time. We're also expanding our testing as well. As Robert pointed out, that Southwest corridor is very friendly, not only from a weather and traffic, but also from a regulation perspective. And the key again for us is, at some point, Bill's going to look at us and our customers saying, hey, we need to do something different here, and we want to be available with the offerings that our customers are looking for.
Well, thank you. And speaking of Bill, again, as the fleet perspective on our panel, I'd love to hear what you think about all of this. But just how much potential do you see in automated trucking? Both in terms of building on the driver assist technology that we have on the market today, and also looking at this emerging technology moving toward highly automated trucks. Is this something that NFI plans to explore or invest in?
So we look at it a couple of different ways on the autonomy side. I'll start with the driver assist, right? So we've been buying Detroit Assurance, we've been buying the Bendix systems, for 5-6 years now since they've been coming out, and we've been going through upgrades and different versions of these driver assist programs, and now we're up to combining the camera with the radar and understanding what all these systems do and how they operate. We have to keep reminding our drivers that these are a driver assist function. This is not to drive the truck for you, right? Because they get so comfortable with it. I get asked questions, well, why didn't my truck stop when this car was stopped in front of me sitting in the road, right? So we have to keep reminding them of that. As far as full autonomy, we definitely see a place for it, and we are partnering with an autonomous company, Full Autonomy. But It's really more for our real estate and our cross-dock operations, because we're looking at that as being that, 600 to 800 mile haul between metro areas, and hauling to some place that you're either going to have a drop yard or a cross dock and split loads, right? We don't drive 500-600 miles between metro areas in our trucks, right? So we're looking at that being a benefit to some other divisions in our company, as well as helping with the driver shortage, right? Because now we can have those drivers be home every night, working in a dedicated operation. Where we see the real case for autonomy, and I didn't bring this up in electric tractors, so we're also running electric yard tractors. So we purchased 27 electric yard tractors that we're running in Southern California, which fits into the intermodal world, right? And now we're partnering with a company on yard autonomy and running these electric tractors fully autonomous in a controlled environment. And that's where we see both the electric trucks, that's a perfect place to start off with getting electric trucks out in the market, is that yard environment, yard tractor, right? You don't have to worry about range. And then the autonomous feature of it, being in that controlled environment. We're hoping to have our first autonomous yard up and running in 2021 sometime.
Well, thanks for sharing. I'll definitely be watching that when that time comes, for sure. But do appreciate your thoughts on this bill. And one interesting way of thinking about autonomous trucks is to really view this as a new emerging mode of transportation. You could almost think of this as giving rise to a new kind of intermodal, with autonomous trucks, handling long hauls across specific interstate routes. You still rely on a conventional truck with a driver for shorter hauls at the beginning and end of the route, and piecing that together to complete the journey. That's one of the concepts out there. And Tony, I'd like to get your take on that concept and how you think autonomous trucks could change the competitive landscape in the broader freight industry.
Well, Seth, the case you just made is the Friday the 13th for the railroads. It's when you talk about things that Robert's companies talked about, and correct me if I'm wrong, Robert, the autonomous freight network and that type of thing. This is what railroads think they do. Now, nobody can stop the march of technology, especially when it comes with safety issues, which again, I consider sort of a Trojan horse. But railroads need to sit up and think about what that world you suggested, Seth, could be for them and how they would compete in that, given that this would remove the driver shortage issue, right now railroads can move 300 plus containers from a West Coast port, say, into the Midwest, with a couple of 10 crew changes. That's 30 drivers that in effect, right, of the train versus 300 drivers. If you took that and made it all automated, it would be a huge advantage to trucks. Railroads need to think about what they're going to do. They've got an infrastructure and a lot of money tied into that. Now they do have positive train control, right? So they have the basis for a digital backbone there that the government made them invest a lot of money, $10 billion into. The railroads have a lot of money and they have some time. You've heard about the incremental nature of this. So they have the time to think about this. They can reduce their own crew consists, the crew number of people. After all, it's a private network that has a safety and therefore train management overlay, has private policing and safety issues that you would think would be ready to go for automation. Now, they have to make sure that there's parity in regulation and legislation. There's talk about mandating two-man crews, which makes no economic or safety sense, but makes a lot of sense when you consider that the two crews are major competitive labor unions and have lots of votes out there. They can automate their terminals. Bill talked about that, and it's very encouraging. BNSF is doing a lot. They can do a lot to use this to make themselves an automated freight, autonomous freight network, or as close to it as possible. And then they have to rely on their two sustainable advantages. Individually, they have a lot. They're financially very secure, untapped access to money to do these things if they think it's time to really, it's an emergency session, if they ought to. And finally, they have a network. Again, we're talking about building these things on highway land when we can't even agree to fix the highways that we have. Railroads faced subsidized competition for years, and it was a disadvantage in terms of building out the interstate highway system, et cetera. Now that's turned to a great advantage. They spend their own money on their own network, and it's in the best condition it's ever been in the 200+ year history of the rail industry. And they can continue to spend on it, whereas trucking companies must rely on the Congress getting their act together. And I would say that's a tough bet. So railroads need to wake up and see this out here as both a possible, competitive advantage in a cooperative sense, as we heard about NFI, but also as something that could absolutely impact huge shares of their business, especially at a time when coal has gone from a primary driver of rail revenues and volumes to, going away in our lifetime.
Well, thank you, Tony. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up, the elephant in the room that is always part of any conversation about automated driving. And, that elephant in the room is what it means for truck driving jobs. So I'm always quick to make the argument that automated driving technology is ultimately going to complement drivers rather than replace them. So even if companies, again, successfully introduce fully autonomous trucks, they'll be designed for a specific application. We're absolutely going to need professional truck drivers for the foreseeable future, but ultimately technology could make those jobs more attractive for the next generation of drivers. So that's my take personally, but I want to hear from each of you on this. And I'll start with you, Robert. You're right on the front lines working on this every day. What does this all mean for truck drivers?
Seth, you're 100% correct. You can even look at our regulatory filings in DC. The international that will come off the factory built will be designed to interact with human drivers for this foreseeable future. We're not asking to remove the brake pedals and steering wheels. However, that segment, as Bill called out, that long haul segment, let's say Phoenix to Dallas, that we did a demo or did a pilot with the Postal Service, that is ripe for automation because currently that's done with team driving. It's time sensitive stuff that can't move on the rail and has got to get there quickly. And if you talk to the fleets, it's hard enough to recruit young people into trucking, but it's try to recruit teams. And being over the road, it's pretty brutal. And so that segment, and I'm stealing this from a friend, Danny Austin from McLean. They're a partner of ours. They talk about they're always going to need their drivers. Again, dedicated last mile. They're their customer touch points when they're going out to the congressional community. But we can haul, like I said, in between, El Paso to Dallas for them, where they're having difficulty recruiting. So it is a complementary to the workforce. And we've started a program with our local truck driving school through community college to actually develop a certification program to train drivers to interact with these vehicles, because you're not going to be able to throw. Again, as Bill reminds you, put drivers behind a new technology without any training. It's a recipe for disaster. So again, it's a common thing that's brought up. I try to be as open and transparent with drivers. We've done some sit downs at the Triple T truck stop, going to mats, having frank conversations with folks. But again, I get it. This is how people put food on their table for their kids. So I never want to dismiss people's concerns, when they bring it up about workforce concerns.
Sure. Well, thank you, Robert. And Brian, I'll direct that same question to you as another company that's working with automation. What's your take on what this all means for the job of the professional truck driver?
Yeah, my comments would mirror exactly what Robert says. It's complementary. The one thing I would say is I have great appreciation for the drivers that we have out there. It's a very difficult job to do in some applications. We certainly see drivers still a requirement for first and final mile and all the other services that they do on top of just delivering the freight. And so we see this as a complementary technology. The population is going to continue to grow. As consumers, we want everything faster. And in the past 6 months has just kind of highlighted, we need things faster done. So what we just want to do is we want to make a better lifestyle for our drivers. To help them recruit, to get them home every night, let them focus on first and final mile, and where appropriate, down the road, there's going to be an opportunity that we can expedite that freight quickly and make the lives better and the recruiting for drivers better.
Yeah. And Bill, do you have anything to add on what automation is going to mean for the future of the profession?
I would exactly, Robert, Brian, you've all said it. And, there's another elephant in the room is that there is a driver shortage out there, right? So we see this as, we have a sign on the back of our trailers that says 95% of our drivers are home with their family every night. And, as a result of the way we do business, with that being a fact, we have a turnover rate that's in the 20s. 20%, right, which is great for the industry. So what we see the auto is taking that driver and, as everybody said, bringing it to the regional and the final mile, having this tough job, be able to be at home. Now you're always going to have your cowboys out there that are going to want to spend the year in their truck, but we see it helping. We just have to be very careful about how we talk about autonomy with our current drivers, right? And it's a touchy subject, right? Because they'll all get their feelings hurt when it's really a driver assist is what it is.
It is a touchy, a delicate conversation, but it's an important conversation, and I'm hopeful that as an industry we're advancing that and coming to a deeper understanding of what this is really going to mean and how it's going to play out. I see we're running pretty short on time, so I do want to quickly ask a question about another topic. The reason we're doing this panel remotely, the coronavirus pandemic, and how that might affect technology development in the transportation industry. Of course, a lot of companies have seen a significant drop off in revenue as a result of this, depending on which sector of the economy you're operating in. Perhaps that means some of these fleets will have less capital to invest in next level technology, which of course could slow down adoption of electric and automated trucks. The flip side is, I've also heard some say that the pandemic is really shining a spotlight on the need for more technology investment and the need for greater efficiency across the whole industry. I'll start with you, Bill, since you're the fleet voice on the panel.
So I can only speak from our side and our view, right? So I know there's companies out there that this pandemic has hurt greatly. We're not one of those companies. This pandemic, because our mix of diversified business, we're doing okay, and we're not stopping investing in new technology. We're continuing down that path the way we need to go because it will help. We're proud of our drivers that are out there driving through this whole thing. It's tough on them, and they're the heroes in this right now, and we got to keep providing for them. So.
Great. Well, thank you. And, Robert, I would definitely want to get your thoughts on this same topic. Are you starting to get a sense of how this is going to play out with the pandemic?
Yeah, and I agree. It's been kind of twofold. For Too Simple, it's been an accelerant. And you can look at even with USDOT, and this as a society in general, the early days of COVID, all of a sudden I got calls from, government officials like, where are these driverless trucks that we were promised, when everyone was trying to, get toilet paper into the grocery stores and the big box stores, the capacity was stretched way too thin, and the idea of, a driverless vehicle not being constrained by hours of service and getting across country in 2 days is very, very strong, even for folks like our charity partner that is on food banks. It was a perfect storm for them where they had a skyrocketing demand and a skyrocketing surplus with lettuce being grown out of Yuma, Arizona, and getting it out to Texas, but they couldn't find a truck to get it on. So it is capacity is one of those things that we hope in the near future from a service perspective, and hopefully we don't have more COVID-19s in the future. But again, whether it's holiday season or peak season or Mother Nature, autonomous vehicles will be able to hopefully play a role in aiding the transportation system, making sure we're ready next time.
Well, thank you, Robert. And Brian, same question to you.
Back in March and April, the virus created a lot of uncertainty. And so there was an immediate pause in cash conservation mode, but we're seeing business returning to normal. Ultimately, whether you're talking about battery electric vehicles or, some autonomous type driving, if there is a total cost of ownership opportunity there to lower the cost so that we all have owners and shareholders and they want to see a return on investment, you're going to continue to see that development and technology take place. I think for both of those technologies, long term, there is an opportunity to lower Bill's costs and the other customers on the line. So a temporary pause as you look back at the March-April time period as everybody, just took inventory of what was happening. But I think everybody is back to full acceleration to get this technology into their hands because our customers are going to demand it at some point once it has a return on investment.
Well, great. I'm mindful of the time here. I see that we're, winding down, but I definitely want to save some time for Q&A. But before I do that, Tony, is there anything you'd like to add real quick?
Well, it seems to me that investment has slowed down a bit in general in technology from what I read in the business press and from your press, Seth, because of all this, because cash has gotten tighter. But it's also accelerated trends that we were seeing anyway in freight flows and the drive of e-commerce, and that's also something that's potentially helpful for rails, and we can see what's happening here. I'd like to say that COVID-19 made the rails like Rocky 1, right? The end of the second quarter, rails were bleeding, but they were certainly standing, right? Earnings were down, but they all earned. They all had pretty good ROIs and pretty good darn good cash flow, and that's as bad a blow as you could take. Volumes have come back. They're up 30% or so off the trough. And as Larry Gross points out, intermodal is actually up year over year now. So, railroad stability and cash flow generation is maybe their greatest strength. And if they take that in a sense of urgency to hear what these esteemed gentlemen are saying, they can continue to have a role, but they better be hearing what these guys are saying.
Well, with that, I'll turn it over to Hal. We have time for a little bit of Q&A here, so let's jump right into that.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you guys. I really appreciate it. I wish we had another hour because I think I certainly could listen to another hour of you guys talking. It was fascinating. We have a bunch of questions. I'm going to kind of try to jet through some. Here's one. It's kind of tongue in cheek, and I normally wouldn't mention it, but I think it's appropriate here because it kind of brings the two together. Someone says, the movie Logan, when am I going to get my autonomous containers?
Your self-driving trailers, yeah, right. I appreciate the movie reference, but maybe Robert and Brian, I'll let you guys answer that question when you guys can make that a reality.
I mean, we understood really early on that we have no control over what trailer we get, so the only thing we can control is that tractor. So that all the sensors, all the things have to be on that tractor. I don't know of anyone. I mean, I know Enride, their vehicle kind of looks like a giant trailer. They're doing some stuff in Sweden, but yeah, it's going to be a minute before Wolverine comes to fruition.
Yeah, I would just say, from a technology perspective, we need to develop the technology to make sure it's completely safe. But one of the limiting factors is likely going to be what happens from a governmental perspective before you get operation run in 48 states, and so it's going to take a combination of both.
Yeah, and as Robert said, probably the closest you'll find is the company called Einride out of Sweden. It does more or less look like an autonomous pup trailer. We'll see what the future holds.
In keeping with witty or amusing feedback as much as questions, someone said that listening to Katie Farmer from BNSF a couple weeks ago talk about their extensive use of autonomous or experimenting with autonomous equipment, point out that rail yards are littered with hostlers and yard tractors. It seems like a really good kind of combination of this conversation here to be able to use EV, possibly AV vehicles in those yards, since they're closed environments. So it's more of a comment than a question.
I just want to say how that I talked about that a little bit. I alluded to it, and the railroads have great opportunity to participate in this EV and AV world. In the early days, it's more complementary and competitive. They're in labor negotiations right now, and that could help. But in the case of intermodal terminals, they're not even necessarily requiring changes to the labor contract. So I think that's a great opportunity. And I'd also like to say I have no idea what the movie Logan is about.
So I'll kick in on that and make a comment. The autonomous yard tractor company that we are working with actually has a rail guy that is part of their company, and they are partnering with somebody from the rail. I don't know who that is, but they see that same opportunity.
Yeah, Hal, and I'll just add, the rails are also a good customer of ours as well. So we're glad to work with them in both technologies.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think you guys all touched on it in one way, shape, or form. And Seth really summed it up. It's evolution, not revolution. Here's one last thing. I think we can sneak it in. Women in Trucking did a survey a couple years ago amongst their membership. And one of the things that came back off the charts is female drivers really love driver assist technology because they feel like anything that can help them have a safer drive and return home at the end of the day is something they want. Absolutely. So do we think that maybe these technologies represent a nice turning point to answer some of the driver shortage questions and some of the aging driver questions, which is sort of part of the shortage, and maybe turn on a whole new generation and a new gender and get some new diversity into those driver seats by offering these new technologies to make it a more kind of compelling environment for them to operate in?
Yeah, I'll jump in. There's no doubt driving a manual transmission truck is difficult. So the adoption of automated mechanical transmissions was kind of that natural step. Having ABA on the vehicles and steering capability, it's interesting how much you fight a steering wheel in high crosswinds. So all these things help not only from a women's perspective, but also with our aging fleet and having teenage daughters, anything that has technology involved is cool, and people want to be around technology. So I see that as something that's going to help.
Yeah, I'll just second that. I mean, I definitely think that the sort of the up and coming generation is absolutely going to be looking for more technology in the truck as something that can make the job more appealing. And the industry is going to have to do everything it can to try to build up its workforce, and I think technology is absolutely a pillar of that.
To Brian's point, automated manual transmissions and all the driver assist technology that goes in it, we are hiring more women drivers and younger drivers today than we ever have been. Of course, they're targeted for us, but a lot of it has to do with the driver assist and the automated manual transmissions.
Well, gentlemen, I just want to thank you again. It's been incredibly enlightening, and I think this is a great starting point. I'd love to get you guys back in a couple of months and take another look at this, because I have a sneaking suspicion that this is going to continue to evolve pretty rapidly. One more shout out to our Platinum Plus sponsors. They go the extra mile for us, and we really appreciate it. So until next time, be safe out there, everybody.